We all do it every day. We don't like to talk about it. We don't like to see it. We certainly don't like to smell it. Hi, I'm Roland at the San Antonio Water System's Dos Rios Water Recycling Center. And I know what you flush down your toilet. Used water, or wastewater, contains some pretty nasty stuff. But did you know that most of it gets recycled? Every day of the year, millions of gallons of wastewater enter this facility and go through 3 stages of treatment. In primary treatment, large solid objects, whether organic or inorganic, are removed from the flow stream. In secondary treatment, microorganisms are introduced to consume the remaining organic material. In the 3rd stage, tertiary treatment, the water is put through fine filters and chlorine is added to kill any remaining microorganisms. After that, the water is reintroduced into the environment to re-enter the water cycle. Let's start at the first step in primary treatment, where the wastewater comes in and hits the fine screens. We begin to deal with the solids, not the microscopic solids, the solids you can see. Inorganic material that came into the plant. The toilet paper is dissolved already, and that is a papery pulp that is suspended in the water that we will be able to separate out. These flushable wipes and other solids, even though they call them flushable wipes, they're not flushable because they don't dissolve in water. You probably might even notice a condom or so on there. And I know you guys are laughing and the girls are pointing fingers at them right now, but I'm sorry ladies, if you flush sanitary napkins or feminine hygiene applicators, again, they do not dissolve in water. If it gets stuck on the screen here, that means it can also get tangled out in the collection system and cause a clog that might back up your house or overflow into the street. You know, we're all guilty of something or other when it comes to putting the wrong thing down the toilet. There's bottle caps, food wrappers, there's other things that are in there. So we have these fine screens at the front end that are 1/4 of an inch apart, and they separate out anything larger than that from the system, throw it onto a conveyor that's behind the unit here to then go to a landfill. So either way, the trash is going to go to a landfill. We prefer that it gets to the landfill from your garbage can as opposed to from your toilet. The second step in the primary treatment process is to remove grit. Grit is fine inorganic material that is so small that it fit through the 1/4 inch screens and is continued into the plant. That is even worse than the larger debris that we were removing out at the screens, because it's kind of like putting rocks in your gas tank. Once it enters the vortex chamber, the chamber itself works a lot like when you put too much sugar into a teacup and then trying to mix it until it dissolves. And the more you mix, all you end up doing is creating a little pile of sugar dead center of the middle of your cup. Well, that's exactly what's happening here. We have the round tank with a motor and a mixer that is spinning it. The grit settles on the bottom, and then we have a pump that is pulling that grit out from the middle of the bottom of the chamber, up and over, and into what we call teacups. As it's swirling around that funnel, we're actually washing it with recycled water. The grit then, after it's washed, gets conveyored up into and dumped into that dumpster so that again, we can send it to the landfill. The last step in the primary treatment process is clarification. We basically slow the water down to let all the organic material that we've been trying to keep within the system start to settle out so that we can remove it. Once the wastewater goes into the clarifier, it comes out in the middle. What we want is for the wastewater to stay in the chamber long enough for the organic material that's suspended in the wastewater to settle out onto the floor. Any lighter material like fats, greases, and oils will float up to the surface. We call that scum. The scum is pushed along the surface till it gets to a trough, and eventually when it gets to that trough, goes to a pumping area that sends it to the digester area. So next time somebody tells you that you're scum, look at them with a smile and say, that's okay, I'm scum, but that makes you sludge. And when they say, what? You say, sludge sinks to the bottom, scum rises to the top. The first stop in the secondary treatment process is the aeration basin, the first step in the biological process of the treatment train. Can any of you guess what we're adding to the wastewater in the aeration basin? Now, obviously there are still suspended organics in the liquid. Why are we putting air into the wastewater at this stage of the game? Well, that's to stimulate aerobic cellular respiration. The microorganisms that are in the wastewater, amoeba, we have rotifers, protozoa, some silicates, start producing byproducts. And those byproducts, believe it or not, are actually favorable to the environment that we're creating here. They include carbon dioxide and water, among other things. Those bugs we want to energize and stimulate by giving them oxygen. Believe it or not, there are over 7,600 diffusers bubbling up air through the wastewater to stimulate the microorganisms. And we want to keep the right bugs alive and thriving so that they can do the treatment for us. We're not adding any chemicals, believe it or not. All we're doing is adding air, and the bugs are doing the work for us, eating the organic debris that's in the water. Once they finish eating that, they start eating each other. It's kind of like lunch and recess all at the same time. It's a free-for-all in there. And that's okay, because they work for food, and the food is free every time you flush. The next phase is sclarification. There aren't as many scumballs in this clarifier as there were in the other ones, but here, all the sludges start to settle out. We have to remove those sludges, and again, either send them to the digesters or use them for food. As we said before, the solids will settle out to the bottom. Those organic solids, that sludge, is then put into a well. That well then uses Archimedes screws to pump the water up to another holding chamber. From there, we decide what we want to do with that activated sludge. We talked about how the food supply in the aeration basins was critical. Most of this activated sludge goes back to the aeration basins and supplements the food supply. Whatever we don't use then gets sent to the digesters for further solids handling. The wastewater itself continues on the track and goes to the next part of the treatment process, tertiary treatment. There are different kinds of filters that you can use in this process. Here we have diamond cloth filters. Another method of filtration is sand filters. That's a little bit older technology, but still very effective. The diamond cloth filters that we use have a quicker throughput than sand. That means we get more water through the filters in less time, and it still gets out any floating particulates that might still be in the wastewater stream. That allows the next phase, chlorination, to be much more efficient in the process. The last stop on the treatment train is disinfection. Chlorine gets injected into the water as it passes through what we call a reaction chamber. In that reaction chamber, we've done some calculations figuring how much flow is coming in, how many microorganisms are still in that flow, and how much chlorine we need to blend with those microorganisms to neutralize them. And when I say neutralize, I mean kill. In order to maintain the kill rate that we're looking for, we need to have at least 20 minutes of detention time of the microorganisms with the chlorine in the system. We basically put the water through a maze. It has to go all the way down one end of the chamber, then it comes all the way back another length of the chamber. As the flow reaches the end of the channels here, it comes into what we call the swimming pool. In this chamber, the last of the microorganisms are dying off, and as the water flows over the weir and goes out that tunnel, we're also calculating and measuring how much chlorine residual is left. We add some sulfur dioxide to neutralize that chlorine in another chemical reaction so that little to no chlorine is going into the river and keeping the river safe for the environment. That way the fish stay happy and they have nice clean water in their river, and the people are happy because the water that we've cleaned and we're not putting down the river, we end up using for the recycle system here in town. And when it gets to their factory or to the golf course or wherever it is used, including the Riverwalk, everybody's happy with the product that they receive. We only average about 60 to 70 million gallons a day of treatment. Roughly 35 million gallons a day gets taken back up into the city and used in the recycled water system. That leaves the last 30 million gallons to go back down the river. The plant outfall is where the wastewater becomes treated effluent. We've gone through the whole treatment process and the disinfection process, and now it's ready to be reintroduced into the river system. The water is cascading down to the river that discharges that chlorine into the atmosphere so that a minimal amount of chlorine actually reaches the river. But that's not nearly anything that's going to harm any fish or any other wildlife here. As a matter of fact, that's one of the best fishing spots around here. So why have we done all the things that we've done so far to treat this water? Well, the simple answer is the Clean Water Act. That basically dictates a lot of the laws that are in place, what and how much we can put back into the river system when it comes to used water. A better answer than that is it's the right thing to do. How environmentally conscious would we be if we just put raw sewage into a river? How long would that river last? How long would the life in that river sustain itself? What would that mean to the people downstream who might be using that river for their own city, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, as a matter of fact? And with good water quality, that is one of the many ways that a good wastewater treatment plant and recycled water program can contribute to the longevity of the environment. Don't close those notebooks and put down those pencils. We're only halfway done. Remember, this is the liquid train. What happened to all those solids that we've been pulling out? Yes, the inorganic stuff went to the landfill, but the biological solids, they went to the digesters. What happens after that? Let's go see. Well, welcome back for the second half of our tour. The first half was basically the liquid train. The byproduct of the liquid train, recycled water. What we've been separating out from that liquid train all along have been the biological solids, or biosolids. Remember, the liquid train was aerobic. The solids train is anaerobic. So we don't like oxygen in this method, so all the biosolids end up in the blend tank. From there, it moves underneath that roof structure to some screens we call strain presses. That's where we remove any inorganic material that might still be floating around in that sludge. After we put it through the strain presses, we send it back over a little ways to some gravity belt thickeners where we thicken it up before we end up putting it into the digesters. The digesters work just like our stomach. They break down the organic material. We actually heat it up a little bit. Now when we do that, we initiate the anaerobic fermentation process. We've basically cooked out the microorganisms. We also call that volatile solids destruction. The byproduct of that breakdown process is methane gas. And now we're dewatering. There's two ways to dewater sludge. One is through a drying bed. That's kind of the nature's way. The mechanical way is called a belt press. The belt press basically uses rollers and belts to squeeze the water out of the sludge. When we use that process, it then goes over a conveyor and onto a pad where it's eventually loaded onto trucks and hauled off. In a drying bed, you start off with sand. Underneath the sand are porous plates. When the sludge is poured onto the sand, the liquid that's still in the sludge, the water, will then begin to percolate down through the sand and into the collection system. From there, we pump that water back to the front of the plant where it starts all over again. After time has passed, we have the dry cake that we call it. They scrape it all up, and again, they load it into dump trucks and haul it off site. Now, in the old days, it got hauled off to a landfill. But now we're more environmentally conscious than that. We have a contract with several companies and they compost the biosolids that then can be used to grow things. Here at the San Antonio Water System, we've completed what we call the environmental trifecta: recycled water, biogas, and biosolids. The recycled water is used in industrial purposes. Biogas is used to generate electricity. Biosolids are mixed with wood chips to generate compost. All those things are taken out of what would have otherwise been waste and either gone back into the river or all into landfills. That is our way of being environmentally conscious. Now that you've seen how what you flush becomes wastewater, is treated, and then recycled, next time you're done, remember, at the San Antonio Water System, our work has just begun.